Pairing the live stream.
We got this.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for hanging out with us today. We're here with a bunch of new guests, so we'll kind of go around the horn and let them introduce themselves, and we'll start with Jose.
Everybody, my name is Jose Lopez. I'm the Senior Creative Director for the Houston Rockets. I've been with the Rockets for 15 years. Started there as a graphic designer, moved up to creative manager, art director, creative director, senior creative director. Before that, I was at JCPenney. I was an art director up in Plano. Worked 4 years in advertising agencies around Dallas and in Panama City. That's where I'm from. On to the next.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeremy. I'm an independent designer with focus on brand identity in the sports industry. I've got experience with Adidas and then the agency Rare Design from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And I'm now independent and glad to be on the show.
Hey, I'm Tiffany, designer at ESPN, creator of Trenches, past design as Panini America, and started at Auburn. I went to school at Auburn too, from Alabama.
Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Vinny, currently a student still, graduating in May at Penn State. Working for football there, primarily in recruiting. And once I graduate, I have a job lined up, and it's actually not announced, but I'll announce it here live. I'm headed down to Auburn to work with Auburn football. So.
Okay.
All right.
Hey everyone, I'm Chanel. I'm the director of creative media for NC State football. I started at Southern Miss at GA there before getting hired full time there, and then I was at Baylor, and now I'm at NC State. So I work with football only. So yeah.
Cool. Well, welcome everyone. We definitely got a different crowd today, which is awesome. We got people from the pros, from college, high level, just starting out. So this should be pretty good. One of the things that I kind of wanted to start with was Jose and his team actually designed the uniforms for the Rockets. When was it? Last year was the first year?
Yes.
They went live? Yeah. Which I think is super cool. A lot of teams, kind of outsource that thing to Nike. They always don't go in-house, but for me, I always feel like the people that know the brand best are the people in-house. So it's really cool that the Rockets kind of gave you guys that opportunity to do that. So do you kind of want to just talk a little bit about how that process started? I know it takes like 2 years for once designed to be approved to be finally made into an on-court uniform. So could you just kind of talk about that process and what that was like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to say like we were one of the teams that we were the only team that had like the longest running uniform. It's the one that gosh, if I could pick up and grab one, but it's the one that has looked like the Chinese lettering.
I want to just talk.
Houston R Rockets. It was a little bit difficult to. The logo itself was an odd shape. It was very horizontal. Mm-hmm. But we had that jersey for over 14 years, and the league had asked us to change it. And then when a new ownership came on board, they were on board on changing the logo, changing the uniform. So got together with Nike, and we sat down as a creative team and started talking about, what were the best options. And there's some things that I can't say here, but there was some amazing, great work that it's in design purgatory. But what we were able to get out currently is I think it's a lot cleaner, and it's a lot bolder too. The way the Houston and Rockets is represented on the jersey. Those steps. It is, like you said, Joe, it's a 2-year process to work with Nike in order to get these things changed, especially our city uniform. In the past, we used to wear our city line was it was based off of our partnership with China. And again, new ownership came on board, and we were able to change that to our more of a Houston NASA space exploration type of uniform. Unfortunately, we only get to do that for once a year. But the way that process goes, we sit down with our SVP or CEO. We make a bunch of different, several different versions of what we think our fans would like and our ownership would like. Once we have everything laid out, we run everything through our CEO. Then it goes to ownership. Ownership comes back with a couple of changes. We tell them, why some things would work, why they wouldn't work. Then we go back to those changes, send them over to the NBA. NBA sends them over to Nike. Nike calls us, and then that's where we go from there. Then when we're at a place where ownership is excited, and internally administration is also excited, Nike takes over, and then they make the 3D renderings, and they put them on the mannequins, yeah. So that, in a nutshell, that's how it is. And I'm sure you're on the same boat too, Joe, working on anything with the league. It just takes so much time. When we had Adidas, we didn't have that opportunity to really visit with them designing uniforms. But we were able to design a ketchup and mustard alternate uniform that ownership wanted to do. And that was a lot easier. And that didn't take 2 years. That was only 1 year. But I do like what Nike does, thinking ahead of time and trying to get ahead of everything.
So the whole process from designing, approvals, process and everything, that takes 2 years, or it takes 2 years between jerseys to be switched, changed?
I would say yes, it takes around 2 years. I would say like a year and a half. But then the manufacturing and production through Nike and their partners, that's what takes a long time. But like internally, like you're working a lot of odd hours. Like you're working in the office designing these uniforms, but then you're also working on ticket plans and social graphics and arena maps. I know a lot of people think that that design is mostly what you see on your phone, your Instagram posts. But there's so much more involved in design, the typography, and like I said, these ticket maps. How are they going to be represented? How are our fans going to come to the arena and see our large format graphics? How is all that laid out, and how does it transition from your social post to your visual graphics when you do come to the arena? I don't think I answered the question, or did I, Darius? I think I was rambling a lot.
Yeah. It's still good. It's all good information, but partially, for me, it's the length of it. It seems like a lot of steps, but at the same time, those jerseys have to play for a number of years later on, so they have to be done in a great way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, like right now, like we were still supposed to wear our city uniforms for 2 or 3 more games. So I'm hopeful and optimistic that we'll be able to wear them a couple more times. But we have some great stuff coming down the road next year and beyond.
Good.
Joe, did I answer that question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's really cool. Well, at least with the new Nike thing in the NBA, it's both a blessing and a curse because we get new uniforms every year, which is really exciting. But it's like, how many times can we come up with a new uniform idea, So I guess for us at the Cavs, we've been trying to link it to different places around the city. So last year we did Cleveland, Destination Cleveland, which is like our tourism company. And then this year was a classic jersey year because it was our 50th. So we got to do a classic jersey, which was really cool. And then next year we have something else planned for, around another thing around the city. But it's definitely cool. And like what Miami's doing is really, really, I think they're doing it probably one of the best in the league with their city jerseys, just with their Miami Vice. But they also kind of have that unique to them, which is great. So right. It's definitely cool and definitely different. And I think it's really cool for the fans to just have, a different jersey to look forward to every year. Cause I know that's super popular.
Yeah. And I'll give credit to Nike and the NBA, like the NBA and Nike, they do this NBA summit where they bring creatives over to Portland for a day of strategy and storytelling on what can you expect from your city, from your uniform 2 to 4 years down the road. And that's been very, very helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Yeah, that was interesting. Let's see what else we got.
Also, if anyone wants to ask any questions on the live feed on YouTube, please go ahead. We'll try to answer some of those. Sorry, Joe, you can go now.
No, it's all right. This one's for Jeremy. What is the process and structure like for branding a franchise? So kind of talk a little bit about your past and what you've done in that regard, and talk a little bit about your process.
Yeah. So when some people hear these timelines of like 1-2 years, it sometimes sounds a little crazy, but the way things work out, there is a really extended nature to the whole process. But just to give a little context, my background, actually, I started as what was called an apprentice in the Adidas Sports License Division, which is kind of like their internal brand development and design agency. So I was on board actually just at the very tail end when they had the NBA contract, and then when they took over the NHL contract. So primarily my experience there was on the NHL side. And so that was when the Florida Panthers rebranded, the Maple Leafs rebranded, the Vegas Golden Knights came out, we did their whole package. And so I was very much in a support role at that time, but I kind of got to see those projects unfold firsthand, which was really exciting and a lot of fun. But yeah, again, to answer your question, like a lot of it comes down to what's kind of the inciting reason as to why the team first wants to rebrand. And there are a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's a change in ownership. Sometimes it's a change in location. Sometimes it's a change in perception that they want to shift. You know, the team has a certain reputation and they want to shift that to move into a new direction. Sometimes the team just feels like they're getting left behind and they're, you know, falling behind the pack and need to shift in some way. But there's a lot of reasons why a team might sort of jump into this process, but those are a few. I guess as things move forward, there's a lot of sort of strategy and discussion on the front end that goes into things before people start designing. At least in the smoother experiences, that's how it usually goes. Sometimes we all get excited and get ahead of ourselves and start, you know, throwing around ideas, but then end up having to backtrack to sort of realign. But you know, it's similar to many other design processes or the life cycle of shorter projects as well, in that there's a process of thinking, a process of exploration, testing, iterating, consolidating ideas, and then kind of narrowing in on what the right fit is. Obviously, in the larger projects, there are more voices in play, there's more testing and more at stake. And that's really one of the reasons why it tends to slow down and take so long.
So you know that we are going to ask you what you think about the Rams rebrand, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Do you want me to answer or?
Oh, you know, if you're okay with it, then yeah, do you want to answer?
Well, like here's my thoughts. Like I'm happy to answer. First of all, coming from the inside, if you will, I really have a hard time judging any of these rebrands anymore in the way that I used to before kind of having the experience that I do. Again, knowing how many people want to share their opinion, lend their voice, influence the project in one way or another. And that in combination with the practical realities of like, you know, changing landscape and evolving world that this brand has to function in. You know, I think the Rams showed, you know, a digital first kind of mentality in some ways. You know, and some people reacted maybe a little strongly against that. And it's, you know, I think time will tell whether or not that plays out well for them. But subjectively, like it's a clean look. That's just my personal opinion. Like there are definitely things that I could nitpick about the execution or little things here, little things there, but like, bottom line is I have a hard time doing that because I wasn't in the room when these conversations were taking place about what the priorities are for how this brand needs to live, what they want it to say and communicate. And so I know I'm kind of answering by not answering, but at the same time, it's just there's so much that happens behind closed doors that it's hard for me to like lay down the gavel one side or another.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of like Jose said, that you have so many people involved in it. It's not like, there's probably so many versions, and the designers probably like this one, and then
Yeah,
you have
I guarantee you there was a boatload of exploration that got left behind for good reasons or bad reasons. And I'm not sure if this was part of the process, but sometimes there are people with a voice that, want to see something done some way, and that's the way it goes. Again, not saying that was or wasn't part of this process, but that's just the reality of kind of how these projects develop sometimes. So it's not always the best design wins.
Good.
I like the fact that you said that, because I think a lot of times like people don't understand that a lot of times the designers don't get the last say. So like,
Yeah.
I thought Rams logo, but it's like you said, you don't know the purpose or the reasoning or who had the final say. And I see so many designers make the mistake of like just dogging out designs when those designers see that like, you're trashing their stuff. I think that more so can damage people in the long run rather than just like, understanding that sometimes things just get out.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And it's funny, like, yeah, until you kind of go through that experience on some level, it's hard to really appreciate how much it can feel like your hands are tied behind your back.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. And sometimes you got to learn to kick with your legs and keep your head above water that way.
Yeah.
That makes sense to use an analogy.
No.
Yeah. But yeah, does that answer the question? Anything else I can elaborate on there?
I think we got it right.
No, I think that was great. Yeah,
Cool.
that was really good.
Yeah, I think, and just I guess one last thing is just like the practical realities of like how the brand is going to be applied often take precedent over, subjective taste. And again, that sometimes dictates like why a mark will look one way over another. And yeah, at the end of the day, these are, like humans making decisions, and sometimes the decisions, sometimes they don't make as much sense as we want them to.
Definitely. Well said.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see. This one's for Chanel. What was the project that led you to know this is what you wanted to do for a living, and why? And if anybody else wants to answer too.
It's a good question. I don't necessarily have a project because I kind of knew I always wanted to be a graphic designer. We had a graphic communications program in high school in a club. So I joined both of those. So I kind of knew I was like always into art. So that's kind of what inspired me to want to be a creative. But honestly, I just liked making people feel good. So when I would make graphics for like my friends or like take photos of them, it just always made them feel really good. So that's kind of when I knew like, okay, I wanted to kind of pursue it more. And then I guess recently, a couple years ago, it was like right when I got to Southern Miss, I think, when I was a GA at the time, I went back and talked to my old graphic communications class and talked to some of those students. And it was nice to like hear that some of the females in the class say it was good to see someone that looked like them in the industry. So I think that's the one thing that kind of motivated me more to really pursue it. It's just to see like a female and also a minority as well, being in a more male dominated industry. So I think that was more of my motivation behind it, and not necessarily like a project that I did that made me want to pursue it more.
Cool.
Yeah, I'd like to bounce off of that just for a quick second too. I kind of agree. It's not really quite a project, but for me, obviously, I'm kind of the younger one around here, still in school, still in college. But coming out of high school, I knew I wanted to go to a big school. I knew I wanted to be involved in sports. I knew I wanted to be involved in technology. Um, so when that kind of took off, and I decided to come to Penn State, nothing bigger than Penn State football. 110,000 people every Saturday.
Oh, Vinny.
That's my recruiting pitch. But I actually reached out to the recruiting people before I even stepped foot on campus, and was looking for an internship. And that's kind of how I started. And that kind of started, if you think about it, 4 years ago, at least in my spot, recruiting graphics weren't even close to what they are right now in recruiting and design. So looking back 4 years ago, it was kind of just not really good. I'll be honest, I kind of sucked 4 years ago. But looking back on it now and kind of being able to grow, not only with the program specifically, but with all these other creatives in the field. I think that's kind of what it was. And once my sophomore year hit and the beginning of my junior year, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. There's something here in the future. And I just want to continue to be a part of it. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
That's cool.
Hey, Joe, I'll chime in real quick. I'm kind of like Vinny, like he said that when he was in high school, he wanted to go to a big program. I was the same way. I was fascinated with sports. I'm 5'8", horrible at basketball. I'm pretty much at anything sports related. I'm just not good, but I love playing sports. So I ended up going to LSU because I wanted to go somewhere where it's a big program. And once I was there and I started going to football games and basketball games, I was just like, wow, I want to be a part of this. And how can I contribute to that? So I started working as working in the athletic department as a graphic designer. The good thing about LSU back then, I don't know if they do it now, is that they would pay for your tuition. So they paid my tuition and books, and I'm an international student, so I paid double of what an American student would pay. So I got firsthand training, and I got to see my work at women's softball, women's basketball, baseball, very little football, but I didn't care. I would do whatever or any of the coaches would ask me to do. And back then there was obviously there's no social media, so there was no. This is back in the '90s, so there was no recruiting graphics. But anyways, that was that's what got me into following what I love to do, and to this day, I get to work in an NBA arena, see these NBA players, and I get to I think that anything that you do, whether it is a social graphic or if it's a flyer that's in the arena pocket schedule, that's going to be a fan's first time at that game, and they'll probably take that pocket schedule, that ticket magnet, or whatever. They'll take it home, put it on their cork board, put it in their room, and that'll be their first memory of that game. So it's important to whatever it is that you design, to make it memorable and give it all. I mean, give it your absolute best. And again, I don't know if I answered the question, but I'm kind of chiming into what Vinny said there.
Yeah, definitely. If I can also relate to that a bit, for me, it was being international. You can go to a game at the NBA, get some signatures, autographs, anything, a high five or whatever. But for me, being a kid in the 90s, I was 6 years old when I started to be a fan of the Charlotte Hornets. So for me, that logo itself was iconic. And then you had those jerseys, and then you had Larry Johnson, you had Maxi Bogues, and I was a short kid in school, and I was like, okay, if he can do it, and everyone plays soccer over here. So it was always, okay, let's go play soccer. And it was okay, I was either the goalkeeper or I was standing on defense, and it was boring as hell because I personally am not a fan of soccer. And with my height, everyone was telling me no, you cannot do it. You won't be a good basketball player. Of course, I'm not a good basketball player, but I did my best always. And that kind of also went through when I started designing. And the first things that I did, people on the forums would be like, oh, you're never going to be good at this. So that hate kind of fueled my fire I would say. So at some point, it was like, okay, I can prove those people wrong, and with enough training and getting those skills in there, I can do this. And that was one part, and the other was it got me closer to the sport that I loved, because the internet was just starting to be a thing back then, and like I knew the Hornets website from top to bottom. I knew everything over there, because the updates would be like once each 2 days or something like that, and those websites did not get like the game info or stuff. So you would just study everything that was there on your dial-up modem, and then it would stay on your HDD. And that was something for me. And seeing those websites, seeing those graphics and things that people would do in connection to those iconic uniforms, that logo, it was huge for me, and it all kind of went together. So I would say that was when I knew what I wanted to do with my life, pretty much.
Nice. Well, switching gears here real quick. I'm curious. Benjamin Clemens asks, and I think this is relevant because we come from pro sports, college sports, freelance, etc. In a time where budgets are getting cut and we as marketers are spenders of the budget, how do we justify adding value, and how do we continue to add value in a way that makes it so that we are not seen as cuttable, right? And in that sense, I don't want to lead you guys too far, but what role do you or do you not see social media playing in an instance where we can't, like a print shop could potentially be closed, right? Like they're not essential businesses, or they could be, and what does that look like for us?
Can I take this one? So I think for me it's like this is the time where designers are pretty much the front of the show, right? Like there's no sports. I've seen teams like where basically the designers are creating the content. So they're having coloring books, they're creating graphics for fans, they're doing the Wallpaper Wednesday, like redesigning the back. I think when I started Trenches like maybe 7 years ago, a lot of people didn't even know like how designers related to recruiting. Like starting at Auburn, it was just like me being a recruiting designer. So I think now it's just more so like that's how the content is being pushed out. That's how people are connected. We're more so isolated in the house. So your brand is pretty much being known and controlled by designers. Like it shows schools and teams and companies that don't have designers on their social medias because their content is less creative, is not as known. Like it's a little bit more dry, whereas like you have a great designer, great motion graphic people, great social media editors, content creators, it really shows. So I think now more than ever, like it's really valuable for brands to be active on social media and to know the value of designers and to treat them as if they are a recruiting coach or something, because it's that important.
To kind of go off of what Tip was saying, it kind of shows that sometimes you need more designers. In my role, I'm the only designer on football that does all of our recruiting and social graphics. So I'm like drowning in work right now. So I think for just being in it, and there are probably other designers that are in my position as well, but it kind of shows that, especially like Tip said, we're pretty much the face and the brand of the sports team or school that you're with. And a lot of the like social media or SIDs want a lot of content, but your coaches also want a lot of content. So it kind of shows that you really need more help. You need more creative, like content creators, whether it's videographers or designers, even motion designers. I know for me, that's been like my biggest push is that we just need more help from a graphic design standpoint. So I think that to me, this quarantine was almost like needed to show that one person can only be so creative. You can't expect one person to be so creative 7 days a week and just create every single piece of content, because that's just not realistic in my opinion. So I think for me, it was almost like, I hate that it happened this way, but it kind of shows like athletic teams that you kind of need to invest more in your creative department, especially designers, because recruiting graphics, they really don't stop. I mean, Vinny's in college athletics and he knows that honestly, it keeps going now, especially because you can't bring recruits on campus. So
Yeah, I'll bounce off of that too. It's like for me personally, it hasn't really slowed down too much. You kind of just have to find a way to work around. And from our perspective, we're kind of trying to figure out what we can make that would relate to these kids and these recruits and the coaches and what they're doing now. So we've pushed out designs that is like, Netflix based or video games based, etc. Something to relate with the kids. They're sitting there and they're just playing video games all day most likely. So it's kind of a different perspective because now you're not trying to sell the environment, sell the school, et cetera, in 100%. And then when you do try to sell the school and stuff like that, you're doing like virtual tours with coaches, things like that. So I think it brings out a different side of the creative process, which I think is amazing. But yeah, it's definitely shown that you need those people in positions and that you really can't afford to lose them at any time.
Yeah.
This is also something that Matt Lang said on our last episode, that pretty much you now can trust your designers on the college level that they can do this work from home also. And you don't necessarily have to be in the office all of the time. And you have those long hours right now, like Chanel said, you have to pretty much produce for 7 days a week. And I guess now the coaches and the programs have a moment when they can see that you can actually allow these designers to go back home and still produce the work that is necessary, because I know that some of them want you to be always in the office or long hours, etc. But I think this situation may open a lot of eyes to remote work and what can be achieved in recruiting design, but also for other teams and everyone in sports pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. And someone in the chat said, it's interesting how there's less sports, but more creative work. And that's how I feel too, because at least I'm on digital. So we're the only way that the team can communicate with the fans, and there's no games going on. So how do we keep our fans engaged and entertained? So a lot of that falls on us just to, come up with ideas and then actually produce that work like immediately. Basically, we can't really plan or like wait for a game to happen. Like it has to happen now. So it's definitely been a lot. Like for me, I've been extremely busy the last 2 weeks, more than usual during this time of the year, which is, I tell people
Notice
that
everybody
like,
shaking their
why
heads.
you guys aren't playing any games? I'm like, yeah, exactly. That's exactly why it's more stressful, because we're trying to, keep everybody engaged since there's no basketball to look at.
But the moment that it hit home, like with the lockdowns and everything, for the first minutes I thought there would be no work, and this is like, it's like 180 to what I was expecting. I thought I was completely out of work, but now it's like you said, Joe, we're on the front lines of this, doing that content, and it's necessary right now without any games being played.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Cool. What else we got here? What has been your favorite experience working in sports since you started? Or, something that you never thought you'd dream of doing and you got to do?
I'll jump in there first real quick. If I've always said this before, like if my 13-year-old self could see me right now, he would not believe it. As a kid growing up in Panama, we had the Southern Command Network, and that was a Army network, that they would show all these NBA games and NFL games. That's all I wanted to watch. So to be able to design a uniform and I see it on 2K, that blows my mind. Still to this day, it just inside I'm jumping. I'm watching the players wear them on the court. And 2 weeks ago, we were supposed to have our playoff photo shoot, and I was excited to have the new set and have the players come in, and obviously that didn't happen, but to see that still blows my mind. to see these amazing athletes wearing something that you created. It's awesome. And the other thing is, we have a great staff, creative staff. Terrence Daniels, who's our director of a senior producer of digital media, Sandra Lara, our graphic designer. They bust their ass and they just do an amazing job of bringing everything to life. There's a to see everybody's work come together. There's nothing like that in my opinion. Like that gets me going for sure.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. If you told, 2008 me that I would have been like in the parade and, have a championship ring and watch all that stuff and be like super close and make the actual piece of artwork that commemorated the championship. I mean, I'd be like, oh, I'll just retire right after that. Like, that's all I need. So, yeah, like exactly like you, it's crazy to kind of think about how big of a fan I was back then, and, live and die with every single game, like whether it was regular season or not. And now being this close to it is definitely cool.
Yeah.
I think for me, the best part is like just seeing, because again, obviously college is very different than being in like a professional sport, but you kind of get to see these players like grow up. And that's probably my favorite part. It's like when recruiting, you're talking to them when they're like 15 and 16, and then to see them like graduate when they're like 21 and 22, it's like your mind's just like blown. Just how they developed as like a person. So I think that's my favorite part, and just like meeting these players that you kind of know more as like a person than like their fans see them as like these big like NFL players, but like when they were just a scrawny freshman coming in at like 180. So so that's probably one of the best moments. And just honestly working with coaches that are just like so well known. Like when I was at Baylor, I worked with Kim Mulkey. And that was just a different experience, and just working with Coach Rule when I was there. So that's probably just the bigger moments for me, just working with these big time coaches that it's like you see them in the Hall of Fame and all this stuff, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I used to work there. So it's cool.
I think for me, like I got to meet Bo Jackson years ago when we played LSU, and that was a cool moment for me. And another thing is just like getting to meet people like you guys, other people in the industry that I met, just like the community within the sports industry. Just knowing people that like the same stuff that I do, like sports design, it is like a nice touch.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe bouncing off that a little bit. One of the projects that I really enjoyed was back when I was with Adidas. I was part of the kind of the launch campaign, if you will, for their new hockey uniform. So the process was developing and designing a new system of uniforms for the NHL. And again, I was very much in a support kind of role, but it was awesome because it was a large enough of a project that it was really exciting. At the same time, our team was pretty tight, and getting kind of to work creatively in an environment that reminded me of competitive sports was really, really fun. And that's something that I still enjoy any chance I get the opportunity to dip back into. But that was definitely for me, a project that was rewarding creatively as well as from, a teamwork and collaborative standpoint.
I would say for me, like it's very different being in Europe and everything. So I was like at 3 NBA games in the preseason. 2 of them were the Celtics when they won the championship, and they played in Rome. So that was my first like live experience of the NBA. But the second one was actually much like bigger for me because I was doing wallpapers for Chris Paul's official website, and I was talking to his brother during the process and everything. So we got to Barcelona to watch the Hornets live, and just that moment when I could go to his brother and say, this is me, if he can just sign some stuff at that point. And Chris Paul was huge back then for me, and I really thought they could be a very good team, and they were for a moment. But stuff like that was really a huge memory for me, and thanks to that, that moment that I had when Chris Paul signed that poster, that I did my own wallpaper with a shitty Sharpie that I had, build also something bigger, because after that one poster, I decided to design a series of posters. So I started to kind of religiously go into EuroLeague games over here in my city. That we had a good team at that point, and I designed 300 posters, and I had them signed by various basketball players that would come to Europe and play. So I have like a lot of guys that played in the NBA and things like that. And that's one of those memories that I love, because I watched the games, and then after the games at the locker room, I would get those signatures, and most of those guys, I would talk to them before those meetings, and they would get, like, guys would say, okay, I want 20 copies for my whole family and all of my friends. And I was like mind blown that those posters probably are hanging over there at some of those houses of their friends or their own. Many of them are already finished their careers, so those things can still be there. And for me, it's a huge collection of memories, because I can just sit down and I remember those meetings and those players. So that's definitely something that I really love. And for me also, I love print. So having something like that, like, don't get me wrong, we work in digital and I love digital, but if I have a photo album, I love to have stuff printed out, because it's just different feeling when you have all of that stuff in your hands.
And then for me, just real quick, I got to get it out. I know that we've all shared our stories, but I had just gotten back from my honeymoon with my wife, and I was currently in house, or at the time I was in house at STN Digital, and I got a call from the owner, David Brickley. And during that time frame, I had developed an identity for the Fury Schwarz top ranked boxing fight that was taking place in Las Vegas. And so it was like plastered out on the strip. And he's like, hey, I know you just got back from Greece, but do you want to fly out here like right now to come see it and hang out for the weekend? We can get you like ringside tickets for the fight. And so just being able to go and like see that was awesome. And then after, I don't know if you guys remember, but he actually led American Pie like song. He like sang it in, he did that for his most recent fight, but I was able to go backstage for his first time that he had done that. And there was this huge banner that I designed that was hanging over. It's on my Instagram story. If you go, it's like my highlights or whatever, but it was super cool to see him. I'm sitting here. Oh, my dog. He's reciting American Pie, just singing at the top of his lungs in front of this poster that I designed. It was the craziest thing of my life, just the whole experience of it. So that's got to be a highlight for me.
Cool. Your dog finally got through since you've been muting him all meeting long.
Yeah.
He's sick of it. He said, stop muting me.
All right, that was cool. Let's see. Anybody else got any questions? I have a few more here, if not. Oh,
Right. And go on with yours.
Okay. So I saw this in the chat a couple times, and it kind of goes along to what else I was going to ask. But what is the structure like for where you guys are, and who kind of approves what you do, and how do you get projects coming in? So is there a system you guys use, or is it just email? Is it a coach just popping in the room and being like, hey, we need this right now? Kind of talk about that process, whoever wants to take that or has an interesting story.
Specifically, as it relates to in-house or like freelance? Just clarifying. Anything?
We could do either. Probably in-house though first. Chanel.
Cool.
I mean, these coaches kind of just like text me, which is probably the most like hectic way to have it set up. But yeah, for the most part, these coaches honestly just text you like, hey, can I have a graphic? There was actually one time where it was literally like 11 o'clock at night and a recruit committed. I literally had to get up and make a committed graphic at like 11:30 at night. Yeah, it was brutal. But honestly, that's just how it is. They kind of just like pop in and just like, hey, we need a graphic. Either our director of player personnel contacts me about a graphic, our director of recruiting, and our SID will also reach out to me if we need content. But I don't necessarily have like a person to approve graphics, to be honest, because I'm really the only creative really, besides like the assistant to me, but he does all of our video content. So I don't necessarily have someone to say like this is yay or nay. It's kind of just like, hey, can you proof this and make sure this is like good to go? And so that's kind of just how the structure is at NC State.
Yeah. Would you say they use you as like a weapon for recruiting? Like, have they kind of used you to be like, hey, we have this high school kid we really, really want. Can you cook something up to, make us rise to the top of their options?
Yeah, that happens a lot. And like the hardest thing is I just don't think it's hard for coaches to understand that it's like if you don't have a quality photo, it's really hard to make a really good graphic. So a lot of the time it's like we'll have like these like small photos from like a Adidas like camp or something or satellite camp.
Yeah.
And so so you're having to like Photoshop them on like a player's body and things like that. And so it definitely happens a ton. So just trying to get them to understand that it doesn't happen in like 20 minutes. It takes like a couple of hours, especially if I'm having to composite them on someone else's body and then make it look cool. And you have like a list of like when you have 5 other coaches saying that their stuff is a priority as well. So that's something that I'm still trying to figure out how to balance on what's priority and what's not. So if anyone has any tips or like structures on how it was done when they started in college athletics, because I'm still trying to figure it out and trying to work with these coaches to kind of understand that the creative process it's a longer process than they think, and it's hard when you're like a one-man team. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's everywhere. Like when I was at Auburn, the coaches would give basically photos that the kids had like on their Facebooks and try to like, Photoshop them. And even now at ESPN, I work with editors a lot, and they want things in like an hour or so. And my boss does a good job at like teaching me more so how to explain to people like the importance of design and giving people like an allocated amount of time. So editors can't come and access for design to turn around in like a day or so. We kind of give them like this takes 3 days, this takes a week, this takes a month. Just more so explaining it so they don't think you're basically microwaving graphics, but it needs to be cooked and thought through. A lot of times people they see so much content, so they don't understand how long it takes to create it.
Yeah.
But to go off of that, Chanel, I do some college recruiting too, but on the basketball side, and it's the same thing pretty much. It's like Photoshop this head on this body, and many times it's like we need to also get rid of those tattoos over there. So because this guy doesn't have any, and you just go and find arms that kind of work from other pictures, or you just dig deep in there. But my problem with stuff like that is like many times it's not one guy, it's 16 guys, and you have to do it like for the next day. And first you kind of do a template, but then this is just gluing stuff together. It's not like real design. It's like you're just trying to make it as fast as possible and make it look as best possible. But sometimes you just have to sacrifice the quality because it has to be done as soon as possible. So I would say for me that's sometimes a problem. I would like to sit around a bit longer and do those recruiting graphics, but sometimes you just have to do it for the next day, and that's a crazy speed. Like when you work long in design, you kind of get that quickness, but still sometimes it's just too fast.
Yeah, I'll chime in real quick just with something really fast. Yeah, you have to work really fast, but at the same time, good design is not fast food. So when somebody asks you to do something like really fast, you need to calm down. You need to settle down, because I can give you garbage if that's what you want, but we're not going to put garbage on our social channels. So we can put a picture, or hold your horses. I'll get you something in 2 hours, because I'm going to have to find the right picture, the right angle, and get the right typeface, and then start building. So, I don't have a coach coming into the office saying, "Hey, I need this in an hour or two." No, and if that were, there are some people in the office that do that, and I'm just like, yeah, sure, whatever. I'm not doing it. Go cry. Go talk to your VP. Is your VP going to come over here and yell at me? What? Okay, well then we're just going to use a picture, because again, good design is not fast food. Slow down. We're the experts. We'll build it. We'll get it done.
and then you can see that in your brand, right? Like the rockets look incredibly good on each design that comes out and on Instagram, on Twitter, and with like even the ideas right now with the Fan Friday, right? The artwork that you post and those game rewinds. That's all of that is packaged in a good branding, and it always looks top notch, right? So
You know, it's funny. It's funny you say that because like right now with this quarantine that we're all doing, like it's 1:30 and I'm texting our senior videographer. I'm texting our designers, and we're going back and forth. It's 1 a.m. But yeah, you're working on this stuff because it needs to go out, and there's your own timetable, so you just have to try to speed it up. And sometimes like you have these creative blocks like from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, and then all of a sudden around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, it hits you. You're like, hey, I know what we can do, and we're all up. And if you're not, well, get up. Let's try to figure something out, because let's get the right work out there. But yes, no, Darius, thanks for pointing that out, because yes, that's great to hear, because we're trying to get as much stuff out there as possible.
And to touch upon with everything said, I'm going to take it back to recruiting because obviously that's where I'm at. But during the season, you'll have like good luck graphics or something, wishing the kid good luck on his game this week, and a coach will come and give you like a list of 300 kids, and you're like, we need a good luck graphic. So the cool thing about that is using your skill set of the kind of what you've learned through Photoshop, where you could build a template out, for example, and only maybe change a number and a name. And there's a way to do it in Photoshop where you import a Excel sheet from Microsoft Excel, and you could just crank out 300 in 5 minutes. So I think there's a way, you just from your experiences, you have to understand and pick and choose your battles. So you can make a really good graphic with limited editing capabilities, but you're cranking out 300 of them, and then you could go and put all your effort into something that is truly, everything's worth it, but something that's truly more worth it than sitting there and making 100, 200, 300 individual ones.
Vinny, not everything is worth it. I just have to go on camera and say that. Not everything that we do is worth it.
Cool. I got one more question. And it's kind of two ends of the spectrum. If you're a beginner, just starting out in your career, what can you do to kind of start, especially if you don't have a background in graphic design? Or on the other side, if you're somebody older and you're trying to get in the sports design, what is some advice or some, steps somebody can take to kind of break into that space?
Yeah, I'll start with the younger, being a little more experienced in that part. You guys are all old.
Sounds like we're like 50. I'm still in my 20s, Vinny.
The resident 16-year-old here.
Yeah, like I said before, going back 4 years, I reached out to people before I even stepped foot on campus. And that was really crucial as well. And even being if you're not a design major or something like that, I don't think you necessarily have to. I think a lot of us and a lot of people in the community it's kind of a hobby almost. It starts off as, and as long as you're committed to being good at it, you kind of be any major you want, essentially, from my experience. Yeah, my biggest thing for younger kids is don't be afraid to reach out to the athletic department, reach out to the football program. No matter what school you're at, big or small, they have an athletic department, a good shot at that. The worst thing they're going to tell you is no. That's literally the worst thing they're going to tell you. And maybe they tell you no, and you come back in a year with new and improved skills, and they're like, okay, like we see the value of it. And especially in times like this, it kind of seems like schools are starting to realize more and more. So they're really trying to value it a lot more. But yeah, reaching out is never a bad thing. And if they say no, keep grinding, keep working at it. And that's kind of what I did my first 2 years. I kind of was just solely Penn State. But then just my work ethic and all that. And, I hit freelance spots with NFL teams. I've done work with Bleacher Report, and it just kind of getting your name out there and all that. So that's kind of from the work side. And then from just your own personal brand side, I think we've talked about this in previous episodes of this as well. Being active on Twitter, replying to people, liking people's posts on Instagram. People might think you're annoying at first, but that's kind of how I came into all of it. And that's, kind of why I'm here right now, essentially, is just networking with people, sending people DMs. And that's kind of, I think, what was really crucial for me too, because, so much of our field is on Twitter and on Instagram, on social media. That's kind of like the perfect place to break into it almost. So that's kind of my perspective from being younger and coming up into it.
That's also,
I think it boils.
yeah,
Oh, go for it, Darius.
I mean, like, real quick, it's like Vinny said, it's like even these panels that we are doing is all based on connections and relationships that we have and the replies that we do to people and how we connect on social media. And that's the crucial thing about like the connectivity of this industry that we have, and that small niche that we have of being sports designers. And that's also why I would like to shout out Tip and Joe for doing the awesome job that they do with featuring different artists and connecting with people. I think that's a big thing that kind of separates us from many other industries where people are like, we're all enemies and everything. But here we can share the knowledge and do something cool. And that also works when you're looking for a job, or when you're overall just looking for new people in this industry to go and talk and connect with. So that would be my addition to this.
I think I would say just like kind of what Vinny said of, I see a lot of people, probably like hundreds of people every day. And the people that are the most annoying, you do like see their profile more, you see their work more. But I guess just coming from my perspective of, sometimes you miss out on other great designers because like it's a cloud of all the same people sometimes. So I would say like somebody that feels like their work isn't seen, or their work isn't being posted or shared, or they're not getting those opportunities, to just, I guess, be more aggressive, because you can get lost in the crowd, or overlooked. Because I feel like for me personally, it took a long time to kind of break into the industry. So I had to kind of make my own way in, because a lot of those doors were more so closed for me. So it's kind of like I had to make my own spotlight, just to get a chance to be inside.
I think when I was getting into the industry, sorry, Dan, do you want to talk?
You had that moment when the dog wasn't barking, but it's gone now.
You got it. You got it. I'm here for you guys. Just go for it, please.
This kind of goes off of kind of what Vinny and Tip were saying, but I think for when I started in the industry, I kind of would make projects up for myself, because I really didn't know like what like a director of creative media for like a college team necessarily did. So like it was like a game day graphic or like a score template. So I would honestly look at like people who were in my role at other schools, and I would just kind of look at, okay, they use this on a consistent basis, whether it's a score or things like that. And so I would literally make those projects for myself to put in my portfolio. So it kind of like catered to the role I was looking for. Because I feel like right now, like a lot of designers make like cool, really cool graphics, but with minimal text. And like, if you're trying to be in college athletics, that's just not realistic. Some marketers, they like paragraphs. So I guess just like finding those, like whatever role you want to get in, creating work that fits those roles. Cause like, it just, if you want to do a recruiting, if you want to be more of a recruiting designer, maybe have graphics in there where it shows where you can just plug in a recruit's name or plug in their number, things like that. If you want to go on the marketing route, show different examples of work where it's not just making a really cool graphic with all these textures and stuff with no verbiage. Because if you're in college athletics, that's just like not realistic. You probably do that like once every like couple of weeks. But on a consistent basis, you're not going to make content like that. So I think that's the biggest thing for me, is having the right work in your portfolio for the role that you're trying to pursue.
Definitely.
Yeah, I would totally echo that. I think it's sometimes shocking how limited people evaluate us as far as what our skill sets or capabilities might be, because we all know that we're probably a lot more capable than what we show at times. And like there's like often a very direct correlation between what you show and what people come and ask you for. So just reiterate that. And then also to Darius's point earlier, as far as kind of like relationships and reaching out, and just like the community has a lot to offer, and I'm not someone who's been terribly active, but I'm starting to reach out and already see how valuable it is just to, you know, introduce yourself and try to be a part of the conversation, because we're all people here. We all love sports, and for the most part, we're all willing to help each other.
Definitely. Well said.
Mhm.
Okay, does anybody got anything else?
I think there was something more in the YouTube chat. Or if anyone wants to ask like a last question or whatever, you can just post it on YouTube right now.
I kind of want to give a shout out to Joey. I've been like a huge fan of yours for like ever. So when I saw you on the channel, you and Darius, I was like, oh my God, I finally get to meet this. So I'm like a huge fan of you guys. So I mean, this is kind of like a first like fangirl moment. I was like, oh my gosh, I finally get to meet Joey and Darius. I was like super hyped. Because I've always seen you guys work on like Twitter. So I want to give a shout out to y'all. Y'all have been like huge role models for me. So shout out to you.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. We're doing our best, you know.
Cool. Well, this was fun. I appreciate you guys joining us. And thanks for watching on YouTube. We'll talk to you later.